Hello everyone, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum here in Morristown, Tennessee. And we want to welcome you to the first episode in our new series, Survival on the Wild Frontier. Now this series is going to begin the month of August, which is kind of only fitting considering that this month has the birthday of none other than David Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. So in this series, we're going to be teaching you some of the important survival skills and techniques that were commonly used by people living in the 18th and 19th century on the rugged frontier of early America. So stay tuned if you want to learn some of the skills and techniques that might help to make you a king or queen of the wild frontier. Everyone, so the first survival skill that we're going to be teaching you is probably one of the most important ones. Even today you have to know how to do this, and back then knowing this or not knowing this could be the difference for you between life or death, and that is of course the art of fire making. Now in the time of the 18th and 19th century, which is the time period primarily focused on here at the tavern, the mainstay of fire making would have been your flint and steel. The key concept behind this is that when you strike the flint with your steel striker, that it'll cause sparks and catch everything on fire. Obviously, that's not the way it works. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. Hollywood's lied to you about a lot of things, especially when it comes to history and survival. Now, when it does actually come down to it, you will have to have some kind of medium to catch the sparks or the embers. We'll discuss that here in just a moment. But most people actually have the misconception that when you strike the flint, you are actually shaving off bits of the flint, which is causing those sparks. Rather, what's actually going on is that the flint, which is harder than the steel striker, is shaving off bits of the steel at such a speed that it creates these white-hot sparks. Now, of course, you're going to have some kind of medium to transfer that over with. We do have one here, char cloth, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But interestingly enough, if you were out on the frontier and you happen to have dreadfully lost your flint and steel kit, there was not exactly a reason to fret, because you could use a bow or drill, or you could rub two sticks together. But those take a lot of time, and in a survival situation, you don't want to spend precious calories. So if you do happen to have your firelock about you, whether it be a musket or a rifle, then you can actually use this to get a fire going. Obviously, make sure the gun's not loaded, but in the lock plate, you have the same flint and steel technology that we are going to be using here today to actually get a fire going. Now, unfortunately, I know some of you would be curious on seeing how that actually works with trying to make fire with a firelock, but for safety's sake, we're not going to do that today. And that brings up a good point before we continue, and that is safety. Okay, so if there's any of you youngins out there watching this and you immediately want to try it, I know it sounds like a lot of fun playing with fire, but can't stress this enough, and that is safety. If you do want to try this, have your parents' approval and their supervision, because we stress safety all the time here at the Crockett Tavern Museum, and we want to impart that to your homes as well. So be safe out there. Now, aside from your flint and steel technology, another mainstay of making fire was the burning glass. Problem is, the burning glass only works if the sun's out and it's hot enough to catch a good concentrated beam of fire. Any of you who have played around with magnifying glasses to do primitive wood burning, or, well, I don't know what other kind of shenanigans you would have got up to with it, but obviously you have a good idea of how this works already. But here in the past few days, it's been rainy and overcast, so this is kind of right out. It's a good backup to have, but it's honestly better to try and find you another rock that'll catch you a spark than it is to actually carry around this piece of glass. But I digress. When it comes down to it, of course, we have our charred materials. That's going to be our medium for catching the sparks, creating those embers. Now, the two main materials being used at the time were cotton or canvas. Canvas was a little bit more expensive, and it was being used a lot more frequently for large projects, i.e. making covers for wagons or sails for ships, whereas cotton was readily available. But if you can, making this in the comfort of your own home, and you do decide to make char cloth, which we'll show you how to do in a few moments' time, I would highly recommend you use canvas because it's a period appropriate material and it also holds the ember a little bit longer than cotton will. But once you have an ember, where do you take it? Well, bird's nest. Now, back then, they did actually use bird's nest, which were great tinder bundles. But of course, with all the wildlife regulations that we have today, leave the bird's nest alone, folks. We have 3 different types of bird's nest that I have made myself. And these are made out of some of my favorite materials used, such as ground up pine straw. Now, if you're on the go, don't bother with grinding it up, just use what you have on hand, but it does a very good job of getting that fire going. We also have tulip poplar bark. Now, of course, don't go peeling bark off of trees. Use dead branches or dead trees if you can find them, but try not to strip any bark from live trees if you can help it. For one, you're going to have to wait for the material to dry out anyhow, so why not go ahead and cut out the middleman and just get something from limbs that are already dead. And last but not least, we have cedar bark. And you talk about getting a fire started in a hurry. I think between cedar bark, birch bark, and pine straw, I'm not sure which one catches a fire the fastest. But with the humidity today, we might have to combine all 3 of these to actually get a fire going. Especially because it's been raining, as I've said, the past few days, and some of my fire making materials are a little bit on the damp side. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments time, we are going to go ahead and get down to the nitty gritty of showing you how to make a fire. Stay tuned. Alright, so we have before us assembled all the materials necessary to get a fire going. And hopefully we'll get it good on the first attempt because, again, it's humid, some of the materials are a little wet. But we have now combined, of course, our bird's nest, and that should definitely be more than enough to get us going. We've also got some split kindling over there, as well as a few branches and even some pine cones to help get the fire up and going once it gets started. So we've got our char cloth on our flint, and we're going to go ahead now and try and get some sparks going here. There you go. See that? We have gotten ember. And now, I'm going to transfer this over into our bird's nest. Some of the bird's nest fell off, but that's okay. We'll start to see smoke. And there we go. I'm going to turn that over because heat travels upwards. And that'll get us going there nicely. From there, I'm just going to kind of start, once it catches nicely, I'll go ahead and start introducing some of our smaller stuff where we can really catch this on fire. Now we might have to tend to the tinder just a little bit, we'll see. There we go. And if you need to blow on it a little bit every so often, that's perfectly fine. Again, it is humid, so the materials are going to fight us a little bit, but that's perfectly alright. It's getting there. We're going to put on a pine cone. We're not going to smother this, but we're going to put on a pine cone just for good luck. And there you have it, folks. Now, I'm going to get this fire stoked up and going, and in just a few moments' time, we will show you how to go ahead and make some char cloth so you can continue to make fires just like this, okay? But hopefully you've enjoyed this so far, and you'll stay tuned for more. Alright, so as you can see, we have finally got the fire stoked and going. Trust me, this humidity and where some of the materials were still kind of damp, it will fight you every step of the way, and you will want to feel like giving up, but you just have to keep at it, okay? That's what I've done, and as you can see, it's paid off pretty good. Fortunately, I do have some fat wood stored away in my collection here, which did actually escape the rain. Didn't escape the humidity though, so it took a little bit of doctoring for that too, just to go ahead and get it up and running. But we now have some good flames here, and now it's time to show you all how to make our char cloth. What I have inside of my tin, and of course we mentioned some of the main materials that would have been used, would have been cotton or canvas. I have in my tin some canvas. Now this is the very same tin that I carry my fire making equipment in, and I will let you know that depending upon what type of canister you get, you may have to punch a hole in the lid to allow smoke to escape and allow oxygen to be introduced, but in a small quantity. You don't want too much oxygen in there because if there's too much, then it can just incinerate your materials. Fortunately for me, I don't have to worry about that because I don't know how well you can see this, but on the back of my container here where the hinges are, there's these little gaps which allow airflow in there, just enough to actually get the material charred properly. So we're going to go ahead and get this started, and we will join you guys here in just a little bit when it's all done. That being said, stay tuned for more. Okay everyone, so we have a wonderful little example of some things that will naturally tend to happen while you are making char cloth, and that is, if you can actually see, just right here in front of the tin container, there appears to be some flames licking out of there. Now typically, before that happens, you will start to see smoke issuing out of the actual container itself, whether you've punched a hole in it or you have those hinges there. There's no need to worry about that because that is just going to happen as part of the natural charring process. You don't want to panic, you don't want to pull it out of the fire, and you definitely don't want to open up the container because if it's still hot and it hasn't cooled down, then you could introduce oxygen back into the container, which might ignite your char cloth, incinerating it completely, and you'll have to start all over again. So that's a good thing. Don't panic when it does happen. Just let it continue to do what it needs to. Again, remember, this is going to take about anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes, and when it's done, we will show you just what the finished product looks like. Okay everyone, so now we have pulled our tin out of the fire. It is cool to the touch. So one of the big things is, again, I showed you that there were flames coming out of the air holes. Well, again, that's part of the natural process. Now, something that you also want to keep an eye out for coming out of any air holes you have in the container you're making your char cloth in is to wait for the smoke to stop coming out. It won't be a great big billow, it'll just kind of be wisping out every so often. When that smoke stops coming out, that's a pretty good indicator that your material is now officially charred. However, if you do actually open up the container and you see discoloration, where it's clearly not completely black all the way through, no worries, just put the lid back on and put it back into the fire. So with that being said, it is kind of a wait and see process, but without further ado, let's see how this batch of char cloth turned out. Oh yeah, looks great. Pretty good. I don't know how well you can see that there. Here, put it in front of my buckskin so it'll stand out. But there you have it. Some char cloth, fresh made. And we're going to see here, just kind of test it out. Let's get us a small strip of it. We're going to kind of put it up on a little chunk of flint here. We'll see with the humidity and all if this will, whoops, if this will actually work with us. So let's take a gander and see what we can do. Got to get the right angle on this. There we go. I don't know if you folks can see that. We now have amber caught to our char cloth. Now we're going to extinguish that because this is valuable and we're going to need it to start numerous fires, okay? Little dab of char cloth will do you. You'll be absolutely fine with that. And again, if you don't have cloth, you can try punk wood or cattail fluff, or even possibly look up some other materials that might be acceptable for making some charred material so that you too can start a fire in the way that was done for centuries. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this kind of concludes today's video, and we hope you've thoroughly enjoyed it, learned something new, and possibly learned something that you're wanting to test out. Now, of course, obviously, if you're a kid, don't do this without parental supervision, okay? I know it looks like a lot of fun getting to play with fire, trust me. But always, always, always err on the side of safety, okay? We cannot stress that enough. But, again, if you enjoy this video, you like what we do here on the channel, then feel free to help it grow by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. And until next week, this is Isaac White signing off from the Crockett Tavern Museum, saying goodbye and God bless.